Good evening. You're watching the smoking section. My name is Emily Ouija, and tonight I am honored to welcome Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai, who is an entrepreneur and scientist, and is also a candidate for U.S. Senate for Massachusetts. Welcome, Shiva.
Great, thanks for having me on.
Nice to see you.
Nice to be here.
Now, I want to talk about some of your ideas, and I'm going to try to kind of bring them around to issues that smokers might care about. I know that you don't really have any specific platforms concerning tobacco use or smoking, but I still think that some of your ideas could be interesting to smokers. And one of your ideas is just talking about the academic elitism that exists in institutions of higher learning such as Harvard and MIT, and how a lot of our politicians in Massachusetts come from these institutions. So is this the meaning of your phrase "be the light"? That people don't need to look to this academic elite; that they themselves can innovate.
Yeah. Well, one of the core slogans of our, "Be the light, declare your independence." If you look at the founding fathers of the United States, these people, first of all, were working people. Washington was a farmer, surveyor, electricians, blacksmiths. And so they had essentially an innate understanding of what they were talking about. They didn't need 20 levels of political consultants.
I see.
Because they actually did work for a living. They actually had skills. And so I think this notion of be the light or declare your independence is a very, very American thing in many ways. Not all other, the Indian culture has it to some extent, right? You go within you and you find the God within you. The Christian tradition has it. But the notion is that you're supposed to work for a living.
Yeah.
Being a politician was never supposed to be a job. That's why the founders, I think it was incomprehensible to them to even put the notion of term limits. But to get back to this, what we have now, I've been in and out of academia, did a bunch of degrees at MIT, but I didn't need to go to MIT. I created the first email system long before I came to MIT, learned how to program. In fact, I didn't find out about MIT until 2 weeks before I applied.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's a very interesting story. When I came to MIT, I thought the whole place was people looked so unhealthy, wasn't going to go. I was an athlete and did a lot of things. And my teacher convinced me, my physics teacher, you should go, because she said you like Boston. It's like the Athens of the world. And the first day I came to MIT, I started recognizing that it was not a healthy environment. In fact, I was very little on campus. And most of my recognition was that a lot of these professors at all of these institutions were robots, primarily. They followed a tenure model, which when it was put in place was to really be a place for academic free speech. And what you ended up having today was a lot of people who follow that, that 7-year tenure process, and they throw away all the radical elements. And what you end up with is a liberal elite who think they know it all. That's even more dangerous, because they talk a good game about race or this or minorities, and actually know very little. In fact, they've become in a lot of ways a centralized fascist group.
Right. And do you think that know-it-all attitude actually kind of translates into thinking that they can make policy for other people, like for their own good?
Yeah, so think about it. So I think the notion of left and right, Republican and Democrat, or black and white, these people create race war, they create Cold War. It's all done to distract from the much deeper issue, which is centralization versus decentralization of power. And that's what it's really about. Elizabeth Warren wants to centralize power. She thinks she knows better, and I believe you know better. Both of these institutions, they have such a hubris. When we put out the sign, only the real Indian can defeat the fake Indian, people immediately try to attack it as racist and call me a white supremacist, when all it's bringing out is it's exposing Elizabeth Warren as a contradiction, that she actually did put on a headdress when she checked off that she was a Native American. We're just being explicit about it.
It's true.
And the liberal elite do not like undiplomatic terms. They want to, it's like what the British were, right? You dress a certain way, you sit a certain way, and then you're considered intelligent.
Right. So I want to talk a little bit about American values. So, a statement of yours that you made is, one of the hallmarks of being an American is our freedom to choose. Now, can you give us some examples of what kind of choices you think Americans should be able to make?
Well, here's the deal, right? When you look at it, again, it goes to this notion of centralization and decentralization of power. When first time people go to a country like India, typically Westerners do not, either they love it or they completely freak out, because things occur in India in a chaos. And if you look at the work of Pragoni, who was one of the guys who won the Nobel Prize in 1957, he got away from mechanistic understanding of the world. It was more recognizing things are self-organizing systems, that you basically recognize that the individual, for example, by the time you got up today in the morning and you came to the studio, you probably made about 200, 300 decisions. No government told you what to do. You
That's-
made all these decisions for yourself, what
a very
to
good
eat,
point.
you know,
Yeah.
what to put in your mouth, and what
Yeah.
to dress. And every human being does that. And the notion is that something emerges when you allow that to take place.
Very interesting. So,
Right.
so do you think on a subtle level though or not so subtle level, the government is actually trying to influence those tiny decisions we make every day?
Oh, yeah.
About what to eat.
What
to
like I have my
what
dogs
to
in my
smoke,
I
right?
have my dogs in my car, right? Two puppies. You know, I run in to get, you know, I leave the windows open and someone leaves a note, "Oh, you're going to kill your dogs."
Really?
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is everything is being controlled as though someone doesn't know that I know that I've had,
Right.
you know, dogs all my life. I need to get them something right
Right.
quickly, that I'm going to go do it with. So the notion of others knowing better,
Yeah.
that is something that's being bred into a culture. So when we were at the Boston Free Speech rally, think
Yeah.
about it, it was 40 of us versus 40,000 people. People are convinced that that was a Nazi event.
Right.
Okay.
So you're talking about there were 40,000 people protesting.
Protesting, yeah.
The free
Yeah,
speech
so
rally,
August
right?
19, 2017,
Yeah.
3 months before that, a bunch of young students. So I love student activism. I've been an activist at MIT since I was 17 years old. And I felt that activism had gone down, and these students had invited people from all members of the spectrum, right?
Yeah.
Left, right, Green Party, whatever. So I had agreed to go in March of 2017. A few days before August 19th of 2017, Charlottesville occurs, and immediately Marty Walsh and Charlie Baker, Democrat and Republican, jump on it because they need black votes, right? And they say, this is a Nazi event, we got to stop these guys.
I remember that.
It was ridiculous. Now, I went there because I thought it was still an important thing to do for free speech. And when we got there, the press, Walsh and Baker had told the press not to allow any cameras. This is incredible.
Yeah.
This is what occurred, you know, in Vietnam, et cetera, right? It was like press weren't allowed. So the speech I give destroys the narrative that Hillary Clinton and the Democrats are somehow great, and the Republicans. You know, we had a slogan that said Black Lives Do Matter,
Yep.
right? No to Monsanto. And I give a speech, you couldn't stream it out, and still to this day, people think, they're convinced. There was a protest in front of Raytheon 2 days ago. A bunch of these people saying, oh, we're communists, and we're protesting Raytheon. And they said, you're a Nazi to me.
Really?
All white liberals.
Wow.
Calling the dark-skinned Indian guy a white supremacist.
Wow.
So
the word has lost all meaning.
It's lost all meaning, and what it shows is that you've lost thoughtful discourse in this country.
Yeah, absolutely.
A couple of weeks ago, you saw a guy punch me in the face with liberal on his T-shirt. So that's a wake-up call that we don't. The notion of free speech was that we could have discourse.
Yeah.
You know, the Earth does revolve around the sun. There are
Absolutely.
facts that
Yeah,
we could
absolutely.
expose facts.
Yeah.
You could have a civil discourse, but that doesn't occur. And what's
Absolutely.
interesting is that people who claim they want that civility,
Yeah.
it's just a word for them to suppress free speech.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
So I want to get a little bit into you talk a lot about the nature of scientific study or the not the nature but the state of scientific inquiry right now. And you had talked a little bit about pay-to-play academic scientific research. Can you describe a little bit about what that is?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's many people who've written about this, and in fact, the people in academia, you know, Chomsky is one of my mentors. He won't write about this because he also was part of academia, right?
Okay, yeah.
But a guy like David Noble talked about this, who was denied tenure at MIT, and in fact, Noam said that David Noble was in fact too radical for him. And give you an example, 2 weeks before David Noble was supposed to get his tenure at MIT, his tenure review was coming up, he wrote an essay exposing that all of modern control systems theory did not come from MIT, it came from a mechanic, a Michigan mechanic, you know, who did the automatic wiper.
Wow.
Okay?
Is that right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Huh.
So MIT professors had gone and essentially swiped it and built, you know, MIT claims it's like the leader in control systems.
Right.
Well, it's done by a Michigan mechanic
Wow.
for 40 years,
Yep.
okay? Well, after he wrote that essay, he gets denied tenure. He sues MIT, and they do an out-of-court settlement. And all Noble wanted was his deposition put out there. You take Monsanto. If you say anything against Monsanto, you're done. It doesn't even matter if you have a Nobel Prize.
Right,
so
right.
we don't have academic free speech.
Right.
The tenure process is a 7-year process if you want to become a tenured professor. And when that process goes down, many Americans don't even know how this process works. And we're funding this process. And the way that process works is you have 7 years for your peers to say you've done something of note.
Okay.
And you have to do something significant at a place like MIT, Harvard, quote unquote significant. Well, how is that significance defined? Well, not only do you have to publish papers, but your papers have to get cited by other people. So if you're writing a paper on pancreatic cancer and you make a breakthrough discovery, and that goes against the guys who are running the current narrative on pancreatic cancer,
absolutely.
they're not going to cite your work. When your 10-year review comes up, you're not going to get the leaders in the field saying, Emily's a great researcher.
Right.
You see, so it's basically a kiss-ass environment. To put it shortly, that's what it is. It's not an environment for innovation. The entire peer review process is a kiss-ass model. Did you know Einstein didn't publish one paper peer review? He thought the whole model was against innovation.
Is that right? I didn't know that. I didn't
so
know that.
they have created the peer review model, and they say, oh, we have to make sure no junk gets out there.
Right.
So it's a pay-to-play process. I was fortunate to be able to fund my own research. We exposed Monsanto that organic apple, organic soy is not equivalent to a soy. And this is so fundamental to systems theory. So I'm saying we've gone it. So the fake news behind fake news is academic research.
That's a great way to put it. Actually, I mean the issue of
Elizabeth Warren wrote two papers, which is a foundation of Obamacare. Both of them are complete fraudulent papers, and she wrote in the American Journal of Medicine. One paper saying that the reason small businesses go out of business is 42% of them is because of lack of medical insurance, high medical bills. Then she upped the ante in 2009, she says 62%. Three professors just reviewed her research and they said it's only 4%. It's completely fiction. And those two papers became the foundations of why we all need to get big insurance.
So if you were senator, what kind of things would you do to try to encourage innovation? One thing you talked about. I'm sorry if I can break in, but one thing you talked about was taxes. Now you seem to feel that high taxes are definitely
fair taxes
detrimental. Can be detrimental to innovation. Is that right?
Well, so I think we need fair taxes, right? People who really contribute and take risks, we need to lower their tax burden as much as possible, because as an entrepreneur, I mean, you're putting your life on the line, you take a lot of risks, you're working a lot of hours. So, but getting back to how we unleash innovation, down the street, we can probably see Kendall Square from here, right?
Yes, I think so.
Well, you look in a 1 mile radius around Kendall Square, or 2 miles, it's devastation. A paper just came out saying wherever they build these so-called innovation centers, the rents go skyrocket. All the bourgeois elite flush in there, but around that, it's total devastation. Not only here, it's everywhere. They're like black holes, and they don't really innovate anything significant. What they do is they're a source of moving money around among strata people. So you could not really have done something great at MIT, but you just happen to be at the right place at the right time. VCs come and fund you. There could be a great kid in Newark, New Jersey who invents email at 14 years old. Right? Not done through the military-industrial complex, not done in the Silicon Valley, and those things are diminished. Or the 14-year-old kid invented TV in Franklin, Idaho. The real issue is innovation is a weed. It occurs everywhere. We don't need to create these innovation centers. What you need is some basic, like fertilizer, or basic, which is you need good family support. You need a good public school system and mentoring. When I invented the first email system, it was done by my family supporting me, a teacher who changed the public school rules so I could travel 30 miles in the middle of high school and do a full-time job in the middle of Newark, and a mentor. Email was not the simple exchange of text messages. It came out of a 14-year-old kid solving a secretary's problem, a civilian problem. So what I'm saying is that you don't need a ton of money and capital for innovation. What you really need is that triangle. Public school system, dedicated teachers, good family support, whatever form that comes in, and mentoring. So that's like the foundation. It's not the military-industrial academic complex. What we've been misled to believe, and Eisenhower talked about it, Fulbright talked about it, and this entire 1 mile between MIT and Harvard preaches this, that you need to go to big institutions and military and big corporations. It's the biggest lie that we've been brainwashed in, and that's the way we justify war, by saying thank you very much, you got Velcro and Tang. Which, by the way, didn't come out of the military. This is a racket that they do.
Now speaking of, so Velcro and Tang remind me of very American things. I want to throw out a concept to you and see what you say. I would assert that tobacco is all American. It was one of the most important crops in a young country's history. It actually funded the American Revolution. Why do you think that it's become so demonized?
Well, it's this. You see, you have to go back to, there are large corporations when they get involved, they can demonize things and undemonize things overnight, right? So think about cannabis, right?
Yeah.
It was demonized. Then probably someone woke up and they said, wow, we could do a lot of big
We
factory
can make a lot
farming
of
with
money.
cannabis,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So if you take a view about that, my view is, you know, Warren and everyone's now supporting cannabis, right?
yeah.
But what they support is Monsanto cannabis.
Is that right?
Well, yeah. I mean, my sister is one of the leading cannabis doctors in the country.
Huh.
Most of the cannabis now, you have to be very careful. It's getting glyphosate on it.
Wow.
It's getting polluted. So many of these farms, when they did grow tobacco, were small local farms, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
More than likely organic, right? Because we didn't have inorganic fertilizer.
That's right.
There's a substantive difference between something that's grown with pesticides and something that isn't, right? I haven't done, you know, when you look at the modern cigarette, right? It's not tobacco. It's a delivery mechanism for nicotine, right?
Yeah.
The way it's like saying, let's look at, cannabis and then some derivative of it, right? So we don't even know the difference between fundamentally what an herb is in its natural state and then the chemical thing that's been adulterated.
That's true.
You see what I'm saying? So when we, the American Indians used to smoke tobacco, right? There's organic tobacco, but I would argue there's something to be said about locally grown organic local farms and what's put there local.
Yeah.
And this, Amazon is, for example, industrialized organic food. A fig grown in Turkey, picked, when it's completely unripe, shipped on a tanker. I would argue we don't even know the chemical constituent properties of that.
Is that inherently better than food that's been sprayed with pesticides?
But it's local, right?
Yeah.
And then you wash off. I'm saying there's something to be said if you go to Italy and when you eat foods, or when I go to a village in India, it smells. It has still a very fresh odor to it. You go to many of I don't think you can smell a lot of foods anymore.
That's true.
So when you say tobacco, I think overnight they can essentially demonize anything overnight if it's valuable for them in some material way.
Well, so that's interesting. I mean, why do you think that that prohibition of smoking could be valuable to this military-industrial complex?
I haven't had a time to look at it, but
it's an interesting question.
Well, what I do know is that people started getting smart in the United States in terms of their own research and got away from nicotine. Okay, I mean, they're smoking and then they're smoking, right? I would say that the concept of a cigarette, which is manufactured by a big corporation, is probably very different than what tobacco is, right? It's probably substantially different.
That's fair to say. Yeah.
Right, so this people probably figured out was not good for you. And so most of that business, by the way, started moving to Asia. So the big tobacco companies started moving their thing to getting people who've done in Asia, Europe, etc.
Yes.
And then here,
That is
Philip
true.
Morris started
Yeah.
preaching like they're really against tobacco.
Right.
They started doing their nonprofit foundation.
Right. Well, I think they were forced into a lot of that by the Master Settlement Agreement, for example.
Right.
And I mean, you could argue that
But they're
tobacco
very
companies,
clever in how they probably respun it
Right,
to make them
yeah.
look like guardians of health or something.
True. But I'll throw out one more concept to you just about that, and I think that people are very familiar with the term, big tobacco, as that tobacco is a large, wealthy, powerful force that has undue influence. But I think one thing that most people don't think about is that the script has kind of flipped, and now public health and anti-smoking campaigners are actually much more powerful and have very wealthy people funding them. So it's just something for people to be aware of and think about, because I don't think that's talked about.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to read, but I can see that. It's very much like, John Duesberg, who was one of the first AIDS researchers. He wrote a very, very controversial book. He said HIV does not cause AIDS. That AIDS is AIDS, which is acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, which is your T cell count goes below a certain level. He went and analyzed the first 87 AIDS patients, and he found out that majority of them were taking poppers among the gay community, which is amyl nitrate. 200 papers have been written showing that lowers your immune system. Okay? The rest of them were doing IVs, not from the blood. It's actually large, if you're a heroin addict, it lowers your immune system. And then a few were blood transfusions. And it wasn't the blood. It was the immunosuppressive drugs you took.
Very interesting.
So it's a lowering of immune. So when Duesberg came out with this, he was considered, and this guy who was nominated for the Nobel Prize.
Right.
So the AIDS consortium was a multi-billion dollar consortium.
Yep.
My sister for many years was an MD. I said, look, HIV, I looked at it, does not cause AIDS. Now, if you notice, they say AIDS-related diseases.
Right, that's very true.
Right?
Yep, yep.
So
Much as they say tobacco-related illnesses.
right,
which
right,
encompass
right. So
very many
I
things.
haven't had a chance to.
Right.
So there are probably other things which are causing, let's say, these pulmonary things. It could be pollution. It
Yeah,
could be,
could be.
you know, small
Yeah.
particles of plutonium from
Yeah.
all the plutonium warheads. I mean, it could be a whole bunch of
Yeah,
things.
right. And I think the point is that a lot of research is just not being done because there is that narrative existing.
Yeah.
You know, that, oh, everyone knows that smoking causes
Yeah.
X number of diseases. So that the research is just not being done. And I think it relates really nicely to some of your ideas about, you know, about looking at things with rational
Well,
ideology and thinking.
Part of what's happened is, from an innovation standpoint and the health standpoint, if you look at the NIH, the National Institute of Health,
Yep.
one bubble, if you think about it,
Yep.
over here is the other bubble of
Yep.
the people who sit on the review boards of the major journals,
Right.
and then the universities. If you look at that triangle, they can essentially manufacture whatever they want as innovation.
I think we're going to have to wrap it up.
So anyway, I'm saying people should look at the NIH big
Absolutely.
universities. They